Testing. Testing.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council chambers. This is a regularly scheduled committee of the whole meeting, one day late because of the holiday. Today's date is Wednesday, July the 5th, and we'll call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. We have a quorum present today, and we'll turn our agenda over to our city administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. First item on the agenda is Matt Reed from SCH, and the first thing he's going to talk about is to review and approve the supplemental agreement for professional services with SCH for the 2021 street project final special assessment process.
Morning, Matt.
Morning. Hope everybody had a great extended holiday weekend. So the first thing on the agenda is, yes, the supplemental agreement. So the project, the 2021 project, as we had dubbed it, is just about done. Paving's all done, we got a little bit of striping, and they might have even striped it on Monday. I haven't been out there to look yet this morning, but just a few cleanup items, and that project will be all wrapped up. And so we will be working towards the final assessment hearing this fall, and ultimately getting that project completely wrapped up and getting the assessment certified sometime, I believe, in November. So this agreement that I had in front of you today, or the supplemental agreement, was to work through that process from here on out with the assessments. We got to go back and pull the assessment roll again, make sure that's all up to date, and get the cost calculated once the final project, or the project is finalized out. So if anybody has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Just one quick question, if I may, Matt. As far as once the assessment hearing is taken care of, we set the assessments. At that time, will each individual who's affected by the assessment, whether it be a business or a residential, they'll know what their assessment going to be on their individual properties?
Yes, correct. So the notices that go out, I believe, will actually have the dollar amounts in it. And then they can come to the hearing to hear the discussion or express any concern they may have or anything to that effect. So, yes.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Britt. Any counselor questions, comments, motions?
I'll move to accept the proposal not to exceed $8,700.
Councilor Johnson moved to approve the supplemental agreement with SCH not to exceed $8,700. Is there support? By Councilor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And the next item for Matt is the review and approve the professional service agreement for Phase 2B of the Silver Lake Trail project.
Matt?
Okay. So this is, as we're now calling it Phase 2B, this is the floating dock part of the Silver Lake Trail project. And we've been waiting for, the council did an proposed ordinance revision here several months ago, and we've been waiting for the review from the DNR that has come back. I also believe the 30-day waiting period that they have on this for the permit is up tomorrow. So we are expecting, they have not received any comments as of last week when we checked in with them. We're not anticipating anything coming out of it. We'll see if there is, we'll have to address them. But so if everything goes okay, they'll approve the permit and we can move ahead with that project. And so this is the agreement to just, we've got a lot of it done. We did the design, most of the design is already done. We did it before. We just have to get the plans pulled together, get the bidding documents all pulled together, and then get it out for bids. So certainly we won't start on any of this until the council officially changes the ordinance and everything moves forward. But we're trying to get this thing expedited as quickly as we can to try to get it bid yet this year. Likelihood of it actually getting constructed this year, I think, is relatively slim, because I think they're gonna have to get the dock parts and everything, and I think that's gonna take some time, but the sooner we get going, the sooner we can try. Otherwise, it'll carry over into the spring, but that's what this agreement is for, so I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. So I'm reading in here, they do soil borings. Is that in the lake that they're going to be checking in Silver Lake 5?
No, there's no soil boring. Let me check and see what it says here.
Several soil borings were for the adjacent.
Oh, we're completed. Okay, so no, nothing in the lake. We did, what that's referring to is for the trail itself, the pieces of the trail on land. And so we had talked about this on the previous phase, the one that's gonna be constructed hopefully soon now, the one by the ball field, that we really didn't have any need to do any soil borings, as the consistency around the lakes has been pretty much the same. So we're assuming that it's similar to what it looked like around Bailey Lake Trail. Does that make sense?
It does, but it is going over part of the waterway, correct?
Correct.
So how do they do borings into the bottom of the lake, or they just It's a floating,
It's floating, but they do have, of course, the anchor posts that go down in and keep it from moving. It'll move up and down on the post, but it shouldn't move laterally. So they end up pounding posts in, they get however long a post they need, and they know how far they have to make those penetrate to hold it in place, and the number of posts, the dock manufacturer figures all of that out. We did do a topographic survey, or what is called a bathymetric survey of the lake bottom. We had our surveyors go out and actually use I think it's sonar or something that they use, and it actually gives us, so they have an idea of where the lake bottom is. Below that, it's gonna be wet, obviously, so they anchor it in as, they do, this is what they do, so they'll figure that out.
so that's through the DNR.
Nope, that would be through the contractor,
Okay,
the dock manufacturer and the contractor.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Anybody else? You're looking for council action.
I'll move the professional service agreements for Phase 2 of Silver Lake Trail.
Councilor Johnson moves to approve. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Motley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries.
The next item is the DNR draft ordinance amending Chapter 8, Section 807 City Code and the update on that. There's no other changes, Matt. That just needs now to go to Kitty
Yeah.
City Council for final approval.
That, I kind of preempted this, I guess, a little bit. That was the update I gave a minute ago. And so now I believe at the council meeting on next Tuesday, the council will actually take action on this ordinance. And then, again, then we're just waiting on the permit itself. So hopefully that will come through here very soon.
And once we take a motion here to hopefully move it forward to the council meeting, how long does it take before it takes effect? Is it 30 days or 15? 15 days after it's posted?
Publication, yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Council?
I will move that we move the ordinance to the council meeting for final approval.
Thank you. Is there support? Support by Councilor Motley. This is the DNR for the draft ordinance amending Chapter 8, Section 8.07 of the City Code. And we'll move that forward, hopefully, to the council meeting. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So Matt, under item G on the actual ordinance where it says enforcement, the primary responsibility for enforcement of this ordinance shall rest with blank. Is that going to be filled in, or is there a specific?
Yes. Is Chad still here? Chad? The enforcement of waters, I know we had this discussion about who enforces waters. Was it DNR or St. Louis County, or can you remind me? DNR. Yep. So we need to fill that in before the council meeting officially.
Okay, and then so everything that's struck out and then in red, that will be in one completed document for Tuesday?
Correct.
And then with that blank filled in with who the enforcement piece is.
Correct.
So if there's an emergency type situation, will our police department and fire department respond first?
Correct. Chad's shaking his head, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
But the technical, if there is I think if there's a massive casualty out there, then the DNR would be the responsible party.
Okay, so that just designates the responsible party?
Yeah, and the DNR in the state of Minnesota are responsible for all waters, so it's
Okay,
just,
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Paulson. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries.
And then finally, Matt, review the memo for the intersection of South Second Avenue West and 8th Street South.
Matt?
May recall, so I don't know, it was back in February maybe, January, I can't remember now. It was, snow was still on the ground, so, which I guess wasn't that long ago anyway, but the council had asked us to take a look at the intersection of 8th Street South and 2nd Avenue, down by where the public safety building is going to go. At the time, the directive was to look at it from the standpoint of the northbound traffic and the queuing or the backing up of cars at that stoplight, and is there anything that we can do to add a through lane, a left turn, like what's at Chestnut Street and 2nd Avenue and 1st Street South and 2nd Avenue. So as we started into that, we also we're going to take into account the fact that now the public safety building is going to be there, and how that site is going to lay out, and where the exits out of the garages are, things like that. So we looked at that holistically. It did take a little while because we had to wait for the snow to melt and get the snowbanks out of the way. We did actually go do, as what's included in your packet, we did some traffic counts, some turning movement counts, some things like that. We took a pretty thorough look at it. And I'll try to summarize real briefly what's said in much more detailed terms in that memo. But in a nutshell, yes, we can add a through lane, a through and a right turn lane with a left turn, a designated left turn lane, like exactly what's at Chestnut Street. Particularly now with the public safety building going to be constructed there, it's probably recommended that we actually do that, because it'll at least shorten that car length up by 2 or 3 cars, which right now it goes over and past the exit for the public safety building for the fire trucks and the ambulances pulling onto
Right.
Second Avenue. By doing this, it'll help shorten that up a little bit. It's still probably gonna overlap a little bit, but not nearly to the degree that it would otherwise. So that is, we are recommending that we go ahead and pursue that at some point here in the very near future. What that's going to entail then would be some restriping of the road, obviously. And then we're gonna have to do a little bit of reconfiguration of the traffic signal itself, because right now it's not set up for that. We can do it without digging into Second Avenue. We can put camera mounted sensors up there to get the queuing going. And we'll have to add some components to it without getting into all of the details. The other thing that we looked at specifically is the EVP, or the emergency vehicle. Anyway, allowing the emergency services people to clear the intersection out so they can get through faster, okay? And so we will be able to accommodate that and add that in, and work through that as well. So I think, all things considered, public safety building aside, it probably made sense to proceed with that, but it makes a lot more sense to proceed with it now that we know the public safety building is gonna be down there. So what that's going to entail, again, is some modifications to the intersection. And we provided a cost estimate. It's roughly around $100,000, which is certainly not chump change by any means. So something that the city's gonna wanna take a look at and budget for. Timing wise, I think we should probably try to do it next summer if we can. That way, when the public safety building opens, this is all taken care of. What we had talked about was maybe trying to team it up with the project that we're doing, the Chestnut Street signals. That way we've got a contractor on board that's already in town working on traffic signals. Probably be economies of scale that way. So if that happens, the intent was to have that project bid this fall or winter for construction next summer. And so as we move forward, that should be something, I think, that it's on the radar of the council now, was on Britt's radar, and so we can try to figure out how we might be able to pay for that and accommodate that. I'm going to mention one other thing that's not in this memo. Fire chief also asked if there was an opportunity to look at the Second Avenue and Highway 53 traffic signal. Right now, there is EVP on that, but they were trying to get some additional advanced warning so that, like, when they're coming out of the garage, they can get that thing cleared sooner. And I'm sure the police have that same issue when they're trying to get out. That one really backs up. So we did look into that as well, and we can make some accommodations to put some advanced mechanism to be able to trigger that thing sooner. And I'm not gonna get into all the details, but that can be done as well. That's above and beyond the 100,000. I wanna say that was 15 to 20 grand or something. So we're looking at that 100 to 120 to try to get all of that work done.
Okay, and that intersection, we talked about that for the state of Minnesota in anticipation for building that, and with the district or an engineer a couple years back. It indicated when it comes time to do that, notify the state, and they'll help accommodate us in that regard.
Yep.
So, because it's a public safety issue, emergency response issue, and it's access to the highway, that the state may have something available for that as well. I have a couple other questions, but I'll defer to Councilor Johnson first, and then over to Councilor Motley. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. The only thing, Matt, I'm looking at is on page 32 of our packet. On the corner, the west side, south of 8th Street on 2nd Avenue, it has 10 feet for SHLD/parking. There probably shouldn't be any parking there because of it being that gas station. Those should probably be no parking that half of the block, just for safety stuff. I know it's probably just a standard template that was put on top of it, but that would be my only concern in the design that's been presented, is that additional parking right next to the gas station, just south of 8th Street.
Yeah, fair enough. That, probably call that 10-foot shoulder rather than 10-foot shoulder/parking, because the lane would still be there. It just would be, we can mark it no parking.
Okay, that was my only safety concern for that, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Counselor Motley.
So I saw the two estimates, the first one, the non-EVP, 98,000, and then the full signal revision and EVP installation is 120,000. So the 120,000, does that include everything, all the concerns, motion, or us being able to change the lights when emergency personnel is coming up to the concerns of Highway 53 for the fire chief? So that would be separate, his issue would be a,
So the 100, okay, good question. There are some of the recommendations that are in here that aren't imminent. They don't have to be done right now and maybe aren't necessary to do. That would be the, these three items under other optional items for city to consider. The advanced warning flasher system, although we would probably do that. But the PED heads and the 3-section far left RYG, right in the middle of the page, Counselor Motley. That is how you get to the 98,000. So, some of those don't necessarily have to be done right now. So what 120 though would include everything, and then on top of it, you'd have to add the stuff for the Highway 53 intersection, so roughly 140.
so is it potential to say that if we weren't necessarily, if we went the cheaper, slightly cheaper 98,000, if we went forward a couple years or even a year down the road, would it potentially be more than it is right now if we went and jumped to the 120 estimate with everything?
It would, and we can look at that stuff a little bit closer when we actually do the design, but at the same time, some of the other components might outlive the life of when you would redo that signal anyway, so it might not really be worth doing it. That, we can look at it. Long and the short of it, if you wanted to do everything, it'd be the 140,000. So if you're planning for a worst-case scenario and want to do all the upgrades, it would be wise to, when I said 120, I was thinking we weren't necessarily interested in doing some of these, but to your point, maybe budget-wise, we want to think about the worst-case scenario for now, and then we can always back off later.
Just seems like in my short time here, everything seems to be going up and not going down, so.
That for sure will happen.
And then one more question, I don't know. So say it's up to the council and we approve one or two or whatever these things, where's the money coming from?
This would, like he mentioned, would be tied to our street project. So then we would bond for it at that time.
Okay,
The 2023 planned street project, not, so the one that was with the Chestnut signals, where we're doing the Chestnut signals down from 5 to 3, it'd be the same time as what we're thinking. So it might even be cheaper than this, like Matt said, because of the cost of tying it to another project. So that might even bring the cost down too.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we should do the whole thing, 31 point some $million. It's public safety, but it's a public safety issue. I think it has to be, we have to do whatever is necessary to accommodate the response by police or fire and have the capability at the highest level of technology that's available at the time. Before we go to Council Paulson, one quick question. So part of that 8th Street South configuration, looking at the traffic flow from the north, going north from 2nd Avenue, part of that configuration would be, the stacking of the vehicles going south isn't that much of a concern, obviously. So in that traffic configuration, there'll be maybe a left-hand turn arrow that would be flashing that gives you left turn to alleviate some of that traffic and to keep, instead of going around the lane, you could still have that lane over there. But if there's a flashing orange light allowing you to continue to go, that will increase the traffic and dissipate it a lot quicker. I see that's something that the DOT is doing on a regular basis. So as part of that reconfiguration, that thought to be considered when you're redoing that light.
Yes, that is. And then I should also point out, Mayor, you brought up a good point that made me think about something else. Right now, that traffic signal is set up on a time system. So every now and again, it switches based on, it maybe is green for a minute and then red for half a minute, whatever. The way we'd try to set this up is it would be more on an actuated type system where the little monitor up on the pole would say, okay, there's cars sitting here waiting to go. We need to turn this light green so that these guys can move. Whereas on 8th Street, especially going westbound, there's not much traffic that comes from that direction. So it'll hopefully be a little more efficient moving intersection just from changing it from a time system to a more of an actuated system. Then you add on top of it some of the pedestrian improvements, which right now, part of the time system, it's time to hold for pedestrians that aren't even there. So it's sitting there waiting for pedestrians that aren't even there. So we'll add that into it so it's more of a, again, push button type where it'll hold if they're there, if they're not there, it won't. And then on top of it, the EVP will allow them to clear that the rest of the way. So there's a lot of good improvements that we can make just to that one signal to help with all of that.
Thank you, Matt. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So on the, just quick question, on the 53 and Second Avenue intersection and those lights, would MnDOT have any dollars that they would contribute to this part of the upgrade for public safety? Is that something that MnDOT would help us out with?
Well, we had a discussion a couple years ago about what the new public safety will come, and Robert Egge at the time, he's retired now, had indicated that when it comes time to that, if this comes to fruition, you're going to pull the trigger on it, come and see us, because emergency access on that, it has to be approved by the state of Minnesota anyway, and there's funds in there, whatever fund that he called it, I don't remember, to help accommodate or alleviate or some of the expenditures we may have as a result of that, because it's controlled by the state.
So is that something that Matt would do on our behalf? Okay,
Yeah, I'll ask them.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Thank you, Matt. Anyone else have any questions for that? Okay, it was to review the intersection. We don't have to take any action right now, do we? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Welcome.
The next item on the agenda was item number 2, Greg Gilness, request for Alcott Park fountain funds to be transferred to and maintained by the Virginia Community Foundation, but I don't see Greg here.
No, he's not.
With your permission, I'll move to item number 3.
Pardon?
I'll move to, Chad just walked out too, so we can, item number 3 was a request from the police department. I do know, I did have a Chad this morning, request from Chief Mattson to review the parking issues in the 400 block of 10th Street South. I did talk to Chad this morning. Chief Mattson's on vacation this week. We would actually like to have a little more time to review this and come back to a street and alley committee to talk about this, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's based upon the issues that's being experienced there by the police. Here is Assistant Chief Nicola. We're talking about under street and alley request from Chief Mattson / Assistant Chief Nicola to review the parking issue on the 400 block of 10th Street South.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So yeah, it's been a kind of a contentious area down there, and I do think sending it to street and alley to have kind of a deeper discussion would probably be the best route to go at this particular point. There's a lot of places in town where there's either a business or a school or other places right across from residential areas. I mean, several of you guys live in those types of areas. And, when we have a resident that feels like it should be their own particular parking spot, we get called down there quite often for the disturbances, and it's gotten kind of nasty. So I do think it's something that we should take a look at and try to figure out a good way to try to remedy it and make it a little bit easier for folks that are going to visit people at that particular establishment. But I do think it's time for a deeper discussion on that because it's gotten pretty bad. So
Thank you for that recommendation. And so looking for a motion to move this to street and alley committee meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Councilor Motley. Is there support? Support. By Councilor Freelieb. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carries. We look forward to some background information as we have
thank
this
you,
meeting.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
Item number 3 is Personnel Committee meeting on June 27, 2023, and the first item was review the Information Technology Systems Coordinator job description.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from personnel want to give a quick update? Your recommendation is? Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
So we did meet, and the union, AFSCME union was also present, and we discussed the overall IT needs for the city. And since the Iron Trail Motors Event Center, all the different things that are coming and going in there, and the need for somebody to be actually on site to be able to coordinate different transitions from conferences to different technical needs there, along with the new public safety center coming forward. And Britt also saying that there's just so much need in terms of IT. Now that one of our employees is no longer doing it, and the one other employee that was down at the fire station is no longer doing it. So Britt and Sherry, I believe, really took a lot of time and put some comprehensive language in this draft, and we feel that it's a necessity moving forward at this time.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's no other comments or questions with respect to this, looking for a council action based upon the recommendation of personnel. Counselor Paulson.
I would move to approve the draft.
Okay, Counselor Paulson moves to approve the draft. Is there support? By Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one further thing is, because those two employees ceased to do the IT work, there is some budgeted dollars actually at the, I think more at the fire department level, that we could allocate differently and maybe spread throughout different departments, but there would be some already dollars in our budget currently.
Excellent, thank you very much. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
The next one was the Rental Code Housing Inspector job description.
Okay, also a recommendation from personnel. Any information that you'd like to disseminate or explain to the rest of the council with respect to this? I think we've all had a chance to review it. Anything comes to mind as far as recommendations? Councilor, Chair of the Personnel Committee, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you again, Mayor. Again, we had AFSCME present in our conversation and our discussion. I believe Jenny, along with Britt and Sherry, did a great job in this initial draft, and I think that there was input from Christina as well, what was going to be needed to be able to begin our rental code ordinance, and then as well as kind of a flow chart of how the enforcement would work, what the checklist looks like, and what the duties and responsibilities would also look like. It was discussed that this could be an AFSCME position, is that correct, if I'm remembering correctly? And that AFSCME has in the past allowed for a salaried employee actually for both positions, for IT and for this, I don't know what the title is here, for the Rental Housing Code Inspector. So there is an opportunity, if the council so chose, to decide to do a salary instead of an hourly. That is an option that AFSCME would allow us to move forward with. And based upon what I could review and what our committee could review in the draft, we felt that it was very comprehensive. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Anyone else have any questions or comments about this recommendation moving forward? Looking for a motion, a council action with respect to the Rental Housing Code Inspector job description. Councilor Beyondich.
So moved.
Councilor Beyondich moves to approve. Is there support? By Councilor Friedlieb. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 5 is approve the resolution to hire recreation assistants.
So moved.
Move to approve by Counselor Johnson. Is there support?
Support.
By Counselor Motley. Is there any further discussion? We still short some?
Still short.
Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries.
Item number 6 is approve a resolution to hire a mechanic. This would be that 5th mechanic that the council had approved adding on to our staff.
So moved.
Move to approve by Counselor Johnson. Is there support? By Counselor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Long time coming. Get this mechanic on board. Finally, I got applicants moving forward, so I appreciate that. Counselor Freely.
Sorry.
Oh, we good? Okay. I'm sorry. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries.
Item number 7 is review and approve the purchases for the Park and Recreation Department, and these are items that we purchased under our equipment bond. We have Park and Recreation Director Brian Silver here.
Hey, Brian, good morning. Brian Silber, our Park and Rec Director. Would you kind of give us a little rundown of 7A?
All right, the first item on the agenda is the 2023 John Deere 320G skid steer. We budgeted in the capital bond $90,000 for this purchase. You'll see that the quote came in at $50,750. The reason for that discrepancy is because we have actually been renting this piece of equipment since this past winter. If you remember this past winter, we had a piece of equipment go down that we had been using for snow removal at the event center, and parts were not available for it. So we rented this skid steer. As part of renting the skid steer, if you then go to purchase it, around 70% of the rental that you had paid is applied to the purchase. So at the end of winter, made the decision not to return the skid steer, but continue to use it for some other park projects, continue to rent it so that we could save the taxpayers money in the long run, rather than throwing the money away that we had rented. So that is why there is essentially a $41,000 savings on this piece of equipment.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the council?
I will move approval of the purchase of $50,750.
Counselor Johnson moves to approve the quote for the purchase of the John Deere 2023 320G skid steer in the amount of $50,750. Is there support?
Support.
By Counselor Paulson. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
Thank you. Just one question. Now that we're purchasing the piece of equipment, does a warranty come with that at all?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Motley.
Nice job on saving the taxpayers' money.
Thank you.
Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Item B.
Item B is for purchase of equipment for the golf course. This includes a Toro Groundmaster 4500, a Toro Groundmaster 3150Q, a multi-sprayer, and a Greens Pro. Actually, it included 2 Toro Greenmasters 3150s. These were all items that were approved in the capital bond. Unfortunately, all of these came in higher than what was originally quoted for the bond, by each piece by a couple $1,000s, because when we received quotes back in January, February, and then got our quotes to purchase here in June, prices had gone up. But so there is a several $1,000s per piece difference between what was put in the capital bond and what we are approving here today.
So what was that difference approximately total?
I do not have that off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Council, questions, comments? How many pieces of equipment are we talking about here?
1, 2, 3, this is 4 pieces of equipment for the golf course.
Very good, thank you. And they're working on stuff from the 1960s and 1970s.
For example, the fairway mower that we currently use literally is held together with duct tape and bubble gum. It has been welded back together many, many times. Most that I foresee us getting for it would be scrap metal at this point.
And as the mechanics say down at the shop, again? It's
Yes.
again? Okay, thank you. Looking for questions, comments, motions from the council moving forward. Councilor Beyondich.
So moved.
Councilor Beyondich moves to approve. Is there support? Support. Support by Councilor Friedlieb. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item C is for a quote for a Toro Groundmaster 4000D and a Toro Field Pro 64 or 6040 for a total of $124,034.49. These two pieces of equipment will be designated for the parks. The Toro Groundmaster 4000 is one of those nice big mowers that have the side panels that fold down, that cut down the amount of time that it takes us to mow large areas. And then the Toro Field Pro is a piece of equipment that we will use to maintain the infields of baseball fields. Both of these pieces of equipment were approved in the capital bond. Again, both of these pieces of equipment did come in several $1,000s over what was approved and quoted back at the beginning of the year.
Quick question for you, Brian. These pieces of equipment, I know the primary use for them is the ball fields, but they can be used elsewhere.
The Infield Pro, we may have a few other uses, but mainly for the ball fields. It's replacing equipment that is extremely old and continuously breaking down. For example, what we currently maintain the ball fields with is essentially either a golf cart with a drag behind it or a three-wheeler. And for those of you that are outdoor enthusiasts, when was the last time that you saw a three-wheeler for sale?
Well, I think it's a wise purchase, even though it's designated for limited use. What those little kids play at these, on the fields over there at Alcott Park, they need some improvements in respect to, and you do a great job trying to maintain it, but you need the proper equipment which to do so. So watch these little kids going, playing on that kind of, that's just, that alone is worth the expense from my perspective, so thank you. Questions, comments, motions from the council?
And it would be utilized on all 8 of our city ball fields.
Very good, thank you.
Move that quote forward.
Council freely moves to approve. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Motley. Further discussion, just one quick comment. I'm glad that you trailer these things up to the ball fields in places in Midway instead of, in the old days, you used to drive it in the back roads. Save a lot of time, money, and maintenance on that, so I appreciate you doing that too, Brian. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
And the final thing I have for the capital equipment bond for you today is approving purchase of rubber flooring for the Iron Trail Motors Event Center at a cost of $9,743. This will get rubber flooring from the entrance of the Chevy Arena all throughout where the bleachers sit on the east side of the arena. This will also allow more places for skaters to tie their skates and get ready, which is definitely needed with our growing Learn to Skate program that we have.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Paulson?
I'll move to approve.
Councilor Paulson moves to approve. Is there support?
Support.
By Councilor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Councilor Freelieb.
Here's a quick question. So is this stuff that can be hold if necessary, or is it going to be permanent?
This will be permanent. It will be glued down.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. One quick question for you, Brian. I didn't see a request for the equipment bond for new seating in the Iron Trail Motors Arena. That was a bad thing. Okay, so thank you very much, but something to look forward to in the future, I think. Okay.
you.
Next item.
Item number 9 is review and approve the purchase of a Chevy Equinox all-wheel drive LT for community development, permitting and planning from Iron Trail Motors in the amount of $28,709 plus tax and license, and this is part of the equipment bond as well.
You mean to tell me you're not going to drive that big old 1989 Ford Bronco with rust spots all over the place?
And a hole in the passenger side
No,
floor? No. we're not gonna
That's
drive
right.
that one.
Okay, thank you. Looking for more council action. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Could someone just refresh my memory about when we discussed this and what the conversation was?
Yeah, it's part of the equipment bond purchase. It's the vehicle, the fourth one down on the list, if you still have the list with you. This is for the rental, basically the rental code inspector vehicle. This will come out of that same department.
Okay, I'll have to look for my,
Yeah.
for my list.
They do have one truck right now that's utilized by the 3 staff that are existing. And then when we add on the rental code inspector, we're going to need another vehicle. And so this is the equipment bond had this in the list there for $30,000.
Okay, so, and I guess I have a question regarding the lease option versus the purchase option. Have we explored that at all?
On this, the lease option usually is for public safety vehicles, is what they offer that for us to lease. We don't put a lot of miles on these kind of vehicles, like the mayor was referencing, the Ford, I don't remember what it was, even a Suburban we've had since 1999. We keep these vehicles forever. So this will be with us for a long time. So we like to buy vehicles that we know we can utilize.
Okay,
Extensively.
and then the last question I have then is this state bid pricing.
None of the local vendors have state bid pricing. They don't belong to the state bid. But we did, if you see, there's a memo from Jenny in the packet. She did go to both Washkey and Iron Trail, got comparable quotes for the 2 different brands of vehicles, and this one was the cheaper one.
Okay, and then in the past, we have gone for that state bid for like police vehicles.
Correct.
So I'm curious as to the difference in pricing at a state bid price.
It was very similar, actually. And Dodge of Burnsville was the only one that responded. And we didn't want to go outside of local if we didn't have to.
Sure.
So
Of course, because hasn't it been like Hibbing that we've?
for the squad vehicles, yeah, the squad cars, police cars have their own separate bid. And then there's also separate bids for fires and other
Okay,
things.
so it was close to comparable then? Okay. Thank you.
And availability is another thing. I think, is this one's on the way, Jenny, or it's here already?
At the time of bid, it was on the way, so it may be here by now, because it was a little while ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it has been moved and supported. It has not, looking for a motion, sorry.
I'll make the motion.
Counselor Motley makes a motion to approve. Is there support? Is there support?
Or
Support by Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 10 is approve the resolution for the year-end transfer for the year ending December 31st, 2022. This is the final piece of our audit. Once we do this last-minute transfers or the last-end transfers, we can finally have Greg come into the presentation about the audit and get their audit wrapped up.
And this is, we do this every single year.
We do this every year.
Move to approve by Counselor Freely. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Counselor Motley. Is there any further discussion?
And Mayor, if I may point out, I do want to note that on the resolution, there is the transfer from, to the Iron Trail Motors Event Center from the general fund. That was budgeted. If you remember the discussion, we took all the recreation department staffing and took that out of the budget and planned to transfer it from general fund to Iron Trail Motors Event Fund. So while it might look scary, that was a planned, budgeted item that we need council approval to move the money from one fund to the other.
Yes, thank you.
Making sure everybody
Thank you.
understood that.
Thank you for clarifying. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And before we go through other items of concern, I see Mr. Gilness. is
Mr.
in the
Gilnes has
audience.
come on in.
Mr. Gilnes, would you like to come forward? And please, and we'll go back to item number 1, under appearance item 2, Mr. Greg Gilnes, request for the Alcott Park funds to be transferred and to be maintained by the Virginia Community Foundation.
If
Mr.
you can
Gilnes?
hit the button on the microphone. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Gilnes.
Good morning. Apologize. My bed was too comfortable this morning. So I made a request to have the monies that we had set aside back in, it was 2020, I believe, it came over. And I know there was some balance left in that funding that was used to complete the Alcott Park Fountain project. And right now, I feel it's a time to request if the city would transfer that money back to the Alcott, or to the Virginia Community Foundation. We have set up a fund already to receive this money. Over the years, you know, we transferred that money back in 2020 because the project was pretty much completed. There were a few things left to be done, and the foundation wanted to close the fund out. We transferred the money to the city in order to complete the small items that we thought we had left to do. Mostly it was the flagpole, flags, trash bins, and a few other small things of that nature. And there really hasn't been much going on there lately. So we feel it would be in the best interest of maintaining the fountain if we could ask the city to transfer the balance back, including an amount that would bring the fountain fund to $25,000, which is our minimum in the foundation for an account to be established. So I'm kind of rambling here, but anybody have any questions, first of all?
So just a reflection to Britt, is there about $30,000 left in that account?
How much was in there, Greg? Do you remember how much was left?
I think there was like 24 or 5 or something of that nature is what I was told.
Okay.
And, or maybe the 24 plus.
Okay.
The amount.
4,000 and a little bit more than
Yeah.
that. So you would need it to be a full 25,000.
Yes, we like to have it, because the account establishment, we have to have a $25,000 balance to start the fund. In the past, we've had at least 2 in the last couple of months that people wanted to donate to the fountain. And we didn't have the fund available anymore. And we asked them to give it to the city, and they said no, they would rather put it into the foundation to hold in trust. And that really prompted this request.
And no lights on you. I don't have any issue with transferring the funds, even if we had to add to make it up to 25,000 or whatever that is a small amount of money for what was ever accomplished there. My only question would be that because our Park and Rec maintains that fountain, and there's money in our parking and budget in which to do that, if they need to access those funds to help do some maintenance on that fountain, would they have to make a request to the foundation to draw some money out in order to help accommodate that, or is this not accessible to the city anymore?
Well, what will happen is just the money that will be available will be the proceeds, the earnings on the funds as the year goes by. We'll establish a fund, and it'll sit there for 1 year before we can draw out the proceeds on that amount. I'm hoping that there are some people who have indicated that they want to donate to the fund, which would increase the balance and make more money available annually for funds that are there. And that money would be available to pay out to whatever maintenance needs we need on that fund.
Okay, so if we transfer the funds over to you, and it's a minimum of $25,000, and we get through that piece, and then that fund sits there for a year, you have that fund already established, you get more donations into the fund in that regard, so you can build up that fund, and that stays held in abeyance for 1 year until such time as then that money can be accessed.
The earnings on the funds can be accessed then.
Very good. Thank you, Greg.
And we're hoping to build it up much higher than it is right now. We've had a lot of interest shown in it so far.
Sure, and we did that with the Veterans Memorial Fund as well, but on a different capacity, which is not for the city itself. But I would ask Maybe our department head, Brian, did you have any questions with respect to this request on the part of the Virginia Foundation? Any questions or comments or opinions with respect to that? And then we'll move to the council for additional information. Brian?
I do feel that it is beneficial for future fundraising for it to be at the Virginia Community Foundation rather than with the city, just because people have a better feeling of donating their money to a foundation rather than donating their money to a city. Not saying anything bad about Virginia, but people's opinion of government are not always the highest. One of my questions that I would have, and I'm sorry for not giving you this question ahead of time to have the information, you may not have it. Approximately per year, how much money would it produce interest-wise that the city could draw off of for continued maintenance or improvement? Do you know ballpark what that would be?
Of course, it depends on the investment returns, but right now, if you sit at a 5% growth rate, which is, the last couple of years hasn't been the best thing, but we anticipate a 5% or greater. And we're looking at about, I think, $1,500 to $2,000 a year at $25,000. And as the fund grows, of course, that amount is higher.
Thank you. And I have one more question with respect to that. Does the Community Foundation take a 4% administrative fee out of that fund to administer it?
$500 minimum administrative fee.
So
1%.
a minimum of $500.
$500
So
minimum.
what is that?
1%
So-
of $500 minimum.
Pardon?
1% annual or minimum of $500.
1% annual or a minimum of $500 per year to administer the fund.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody?
Would also like to
Go ahead, and then we'll go to Counselor Johnson.
Would also like to point out that in their documents, they are stating that they would create an advisory committee for this, which would be the sitting Parks and Rec Commission. One of the things that we would end up doing with this is if there were some things that we wanted to add to the fountain, I know in our initial design of the fountain, we had hoped for some pergolas to go over the benches. So as this fund continues to develop, pergolas are more than $1,500, so we could not utilize the money for a few years. Since it is a new fountain, let the money that's available to us grow, then present to the Park and Rec Commission what we would like to do, utilize those funds, then have them make their recommendation to the foundation, utilize those funds for the continued development and beautification of the fountain. In addition, we would be able to use these funds for routine maintenance. Say a pump goes out, we'd be able to use those funds to replace that pump to keep the fountain running, and there's that money sitting there from now until the end of time to maintain the fountain so it never falls into a state of disrepair again where it will cost millions of dollars to bring it back.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Counselor Johnson.
So we haven't used any of the money that was transferred in 2020 to do anything around the fountain?
We have not.
I'm concerned about the process of getting the money when we need it. Government takes a lot of time as it is. So I would want to see that step-by-step process spelled out very clearly. What our process is, how do we determine if it's our money to do it or if it's foundation money that's going to be used. And I am curious to know why the foundation can't just start a fund and let people donate to it. Why there has to be money put in it to start.
Well, we have to have a starting balance? Is that what you're asking? Why we have
Well,
to?
why can the foundation not just say, here's the fountain maintenance fund, go ahead and donate to us?
Yeah, without putting the $25,000 in, why don't we have a fund?
Correct.
In order to start a separate fund, we have to have a $25,000 minimum contribution.
That,
This is a separate fund from the regular foundation, basic money.
I understand, but if the foundation is making the request to start a fund, why can't they just start their fund? Because it's not us requesting this fund. So we're not saying, the city's not saying, hey, we want to start an independent fund. You're coming to us as the foundation saying, we want to start this fund, but we want your money. I'm confused why you can't just start the fund and just accept donations.
Well, like I said, in order to start a fund, we have to have a $25,000 starting balance. That is one of the rules that we have at the foundation. And the reason for coming forward with this request, from my point of view, was when all that money was contributed to the foundation by private donors, it was meant to be used for the fountain fund. Because the donations had pretty much ceased when we transferred the fund over, we couldn't start it then because, like I said, we had to wait a year to use any money that would be generated from that fund. And there were parts of that project that still had to be completed. So we thought it would be best to transfer it to the city. These are private donations for the city to hold, and it could be accessed immediately if it was needed. Now, at this point, people have come and requested to donate money to the fund, and we didn't have it at that time. So we did establish a fund based on the fact that we're making this request from the city to have that money transferred back, which were private donations for that purpose. I'm not sure if I mentioned your question or not, Steve.
Well, I guess my concern is that when there's more additional donations, the city's going to end up paying for whatever happens at the fountain no matter what. It's our fountain. And so my concern is that we're making $1,000 a year because there's the $500 fee. Is it practical that because we've already had lights go out, we've had some stuff happen, is it practical to create a 2-month process to get money out for the pumps and that kind of stuff? I'm trying to figure out why we're doing that.
The process
As opposed
would
to
be-
you just starting a separate fund. We have our 20,000 that we can use immediately should tomorrow someone do something and we need to fix it. I'm just trying to understand why there needs to be more steps to the process.
It'll be handled, we have a Friends of the Library Fund, which is basically going to be a very similar project as that. Friends of the Library Fund, they've established a fund at the foundation, and every year that money is made available to them. It's immediately available whenever they have a project or something they need to spend money on. It would have to go just to get approval from the Foundation Board of Directors, and that just is a matter, it's really a formality.
I guess my other
You
concern
look confused
is-
like I'm not saying.
Well, no, my other concern is that this is going to give the ability for the foundation as an organization to go, we want you to do this. Put this up, put that up, put that up. And the Friends of the Library is a separate 501c3 that does everything independent. I mean, they work very closely with Jody, and I've sit on the board and that kind of stuff. I don't see this as being, and we didn't donate any money to start that fund. I'm just trying to understand the process and why, you've answered the question, I think, as best as you can right now for what I'm asking, and I would like to see more details, and I want to make sure this is streamlined. My biggest concern is that we're going to start getting directives from this fund that this is what we're going to do this summer, and I don't want to see that happening.
Oh, that's not
Thank
going
you,
to
Mayor.
happen. That won't happen. It doesn't work that way.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Okay, thank you. Brian?
Part of my answer to your question of why I believe that this may be beneficial is right now how the system is set up is if I have a pump that goes out in the fountain and it's $500 to repair, or $500 to order the pump. I order the pump, I replace it, we take $500 out of that fund. And now the fund is $500 smaller. If the foundation is overseeing this, next year, the fund is $1,700 bigger, and it is growing because there is that 5% interest. Right now, how the city has it, our fund does not grow based off of interest. So this could, as long as we don't have maintenance, or as long as we're not doing things, we can, by keeping things working and not replacing them, we'll be able to grow that fund to help offset maintenance costs. And that fund will continue to grow when we don't use it, whereas with the city, it shrinks whenever we do use it.
Thank you, Brian. Counselor Motley?
Does the city of Virginia have a great working relationship with the Virginia Community Foundation?
I believe they do. Does anybody have any?
I will move to make the motion to transfer funds to the Virginia Community Foundation.
And if I may ask a clarification on your motion, Counselor Motley, seeing as they need to establish a minimum balance of $25,000, if it's $24,400 or whatever it is, are we going to make up the difference to transfer $25,000 to that fund? In order for them to establish the fund, in order to maintain the fund, they have to have a minimum balance of $25,000.
If it's up to the council, I will amend my motion to include that.
Okay, thank you. Is there support for that? Support by Counselor Friedlieb. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I will not be supporting this until I know the dollar amount that the city needs to contribute. I'm concerned that you've already said you have other offers for donations. I feel like we should just be transferring in what we have, and then you all can fundraise for the additional whatever it is. But I'd like to know the numbers before I approve anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the purpose, and I think we all want to see what that number is. So moving the motion forward to the next city council, and hopefully we'll be able to have that question answered prior to us making a formal vote at the council meeting. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Roll call, please, Pam.
Motley,
Yes.
Friedlieb,
Aye.
Paulson,
Aye.
Beyondich,
Recuse.
Johnson,
No.
Aaroncelli is absent, Cuffey.
Aye. So if we're spending money, if we have to add money to the account, we have to have a supermajority in which to do that. So we have 4 in favor, 1 absent, 1 recusal, so motion fails. Thank you.
I will make a motion to bring this proposal to the council meeting without the money involved so that we can have all the information to make a proper vote.
Okay, moved by Counselor Johnson, supported by
Support.
Counselor Freely. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. So we'll get all that information, Mr. Gilness. It'll come before the next council meeting, so we'll have a finite number, and then we can still make a motion at the council meeting with respect to that request that you're making.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item number 11, discuss new legislation regarding cannabis products.
Thank you. I read a bunch of things about that and met with a lot of people with respect to that. So I'll hold that in abeyance and we'll move around the council. First, we'll go right to left. First, Councilor Beyondich, then we'll go to Councilor Paulson, and then over to anyone else. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a note that I recused on the last vote as well. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Okay, that was the clarification we're looking for? Okay, for good, thank you. Okay, discussion on the cannabis. I know that that League of Minnesota Cities, Councilor Motley gave a really good presentation, a highlight, a synopsis of what the legislation entails from the information provided at the League of Minnesota Cities meeting. So this is our chance to continue to discuss the legislation and what we're authorized to do, what our options are moving forward. So this is a chance for us to sit here and discuss that. I'm not sure if it's something that we can, or it looks like I would think it bodes for a more detailed discussion about this through some kind of a committee, but I open this up for the rest of the council for discussion with respect to the new legislation. So do we have any information on the new legislation at all? Colleen, yeah, I read it. Do you have any additional information other than what's in our packet?
No. Good morning, council and Mayor Covey. The process is moving through, and as you can see, I just actually tried to see if there's a public, we usually look up Minnesota statutes. I'd have to dig around a little bit more. I've got the stuff from the league as well. This is going to be a process that's going to be moving forward in stages. So for example, on August 1, possession to some degree is allowed. And then in the next 12 to 18 months, the Office of Cannabis Management has been established, and they'll be promulgating regulations and more details regarding registration of these businesses, of who can do it, how it's going to be done. There's some, general precepts, and I'm happy to answer any questions of what I know so far. But it is going to be kind of a process for the next 12 to 18 months as we see those regulations come through.
I just have two questions, if I may, and then we'll move on to the first is if this is established and we establish an ordinance allowing for the sale, whatever that dispensary is going to be in the use, is it a collectible tax on the 1% the city has? It is, correct? Okay, thank you. And that bearing in mind, now there's a lot of people have called me about that, indicating, well, you get tax revenue from that as a result of that. But there's a lot of other components that are involved in this matter. So the other question is, if the city of Virginia, for the sake of a question, if we were to take no action at all, establish no ordinance with respect to cannabis, what are the ramifications of that? Britt or Colleen?
Because we are a city of under 12,500, we do have to allow for the registration of one business to sell.
Okay.
We cannot do a license, but we can do a retail registration, and then we can do zoning to determine where that can be located. Councilor Motley had also mentioned that this is the one time uniquely in state statute that the city can be the one to take the retail license if we so choose. The minimum license, again, is one, but we could do more if we so sought to do that.
Like a municipal liquor store, you can have a municipal cannabis dispensary? Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you.
And then just adding on that, just with more detail that you didn't ask for, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there.
Please.
The other situation is if the county, and I don't know, given how it's going to roll out, I don't know that this is practical, but if the county has more than one active registration for every 12,500 residents in the county, the city can decline to register within the city. So for example, if St. Louis County had it filled up very quickly and there were enough businesses operating that made that 12,500 number, and they were all active, the city wouldn't be asked to register within the city of Virginia. But again, given the rollout and how that's going to happen, I'm not sure that that's really a very practical situation. We'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, and as Britt said, the statute does provide for the city to operate it. I know there's two components there where cities have their own municipal liquor store already. Those are cities under 10,000. They can ask for a license to do cannabis as well, or the city could operate its own. Again, just remember that all licensing is going to go through the Office of Cannabis Management. What happens is they will provide information to the city can weigh in on any proposed licenses in terms of whether it fits their zoning, if there's any other concerns the city has regarding the placement or the type of registration, whether the folks have paid their property taxes. You'll also be able to weigh in on a few other things. So the city will be advised of who's applied, and the ultimate decision will be the Office of Cannabis Management, though. The city won't be in the position of permitting it or not. They'll be able to weigh in and provide information and also apply, but they aren't going to be the ultimate decision maker.
My last question before we move to council. Who is the enforcement authority? State? State of Minnesota is the enforcement authority.
I believe so, yeah. In terms of the civil liability or the
Well,
civil or?
registration, or they have a person that's operating a dispensary without a permit by the city.
I think the city would enforce it, and again, probably be in conjunction with the Office of Cannabis Management to take any action as to the license.
So the inspection of the approved dispensary is done by the state of Minnesota.
Our goal, our role in this is the zoning and land use.
Right.
To make sure that they're not locating in areas where we specifically did not want them to be located.
And so the other issue is I don't want to have the police department be required to do compliance checks in cannabis purchases like they have to do with.
Undoubtedly, we're going to have to.
Most like that's going to be the case. You know, I think that is, okay. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to just, if I could, ask a few questions from page 63 in our packet, and possibly Counselor Motley would have some of these answers, since she went to the conference. And so under the item A2, it says this allows a person of 21 years of age or older to, and then there's some different bullet points. So when they talk about a cannabis flower, does that mean the actual marijuana that will be used to smoke? Is that what they're talking about, a flower? Or chat?
Yes, that's what that
I
is.
just, for me, like, this is an education process for me as well, so I understand.
There's the flower, and I was just in chief, there's a flower, and then there's the cannabis that comes from the flower.
We're literally really getting into the weeds on this one now, aren't we? My goodness. Yeah, it's, and even us looking through it.
Is that a pun?
Little pun for
Into
you,
the
yes,
weeds?
on
Okay, all
a
right.
Monday, Wednesday morning, so.
thank you.
Yeah, it's, even us looking at all of the changes, I had a great discussion last week at the conference I was at with a lot of our local attorneys, and man, there's a lot of stuff that we all have to wrap our heads around, so it's gonna be quite interesting for quite a while here. And, as Colleen pointed out, we are gonna have some time as they're trying to establish this management agency and everything else, but, yeah, I mean, when it comes to possession, pretty much there's not a lot that's gonna be able to be done. To me, as a city, the big things that we need to look at, in which it does state that people are supposed to use this at home. It's supposed to be on private property, as long as it's being allowed by whoever the property owner is. But I still think it would be worthwhile of us establishing an ordinance that states specifically that on public property, we are not allowing this to happen. Because, I was in Houston last week, and you walked around, you smelled it everywhere,
So,
Question that you had was about the flower.
thank you, Mayor, because it states specifically, and I don't know where this information came from, but possesses 2 ounces of less of cannabis flower in a public place.
Right.
So the cannabis flower is the actual,
Yep, which is being ground up and smoked.
okay. So when it says possesses 2 ounces of or less of cannabis flower in a public place, that means it can be on your person but not smoking it? Is that
Correct.
what that means?
Yep, just in your possession.
Okay.
Not actually using the product.
Not actually using the product. And then they can possess 2 pounds or less of cannabis flower in their residence. They can possess or transport 8 grams or less of adult-use cannabis concentrate. And I just want to know I'm sorry I'm going through this, but I
No,
want
this is
to
good-
understand,
good
because
stuff.
that's going to help me kind of gear what we can do to establish some safety mechanisms. So it's, again, possess or transport 8 grams or less of adult-use cannabis concentrate. What is concentrate?
So it's a little bit more of the potent side of things, and that's what's so tricky. I guess if you wanted to compare it almost to like an alcohol proof, as far as volume of, the alcohol within the drink, it's kind of similar to that.
Okay.
In a roundabout way, if that's where I try to put my head,
So it's still a flower and not like an oil?
No, it wouldn't be in a flower form at that point. Quite often, it can be in even like a liquid that can be used to smoke. There's there's the marijuana waxes that are more of a concentrate.
Okay.
So a lot more powerful
That
typically,
helps a
though.
little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I get the edibles. So this is the other one I guess I'm not understanding completely. Give away cannabis flower and products in an amount that is legal for a person to possess in public. So they can legally possess in public 2 ounces or less, and what it's saying is they can also give that away?
That could share with, whether it be household member, spouse, but again, it's supposed to be somebody over the age of 21.
Okay, so, and this is just giving, not selling,
Correct.
okay? Then it says, the law authorizes an individual to use adult-use cannabis flower and adult-use cannabis products in a private residence, including the individual's curtilage or yard, on private property unless the owner of the property prohibits the use of the products. Part of my question is, what do we do with the rental portion with our new rental code ordinance if a landlord chooses that this is not what they want on their property, but their tenants are,
Right.
they have the legal right to do this? How do we reconcile that? So that's part of so if we could put that down maybe as a question going forward.
And it is a good question, and I do think you would have at least some landlords that would put that part of a lease agreement to let people know. I have a feeling down the road, though, that would be challenged, and unfortunately, it would probably go on the side of the person renting over the landlord, to be honest. That's just my thought on it. But with the direction we see all these laws going, that's just kind of what I foresee happening.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm being so long-winded, but I just.
please
Just
continue.
for clarification on
Yep.
what we're doing. So then it says, on the premises of an establishment or event licensed to permit on-site consumption. So does that mean like there's going to be little quarantine areas that people can go and smoke?
If it's allowed by the city. And to me, that's another thing that we could look at as part of an ordinance. I mean, essentially, you go to some places that have had marijuana legalized for quite a while, and essentially, there's marijuana bars, where you go in and you smoke in that particular bar. That's the point of that bar. Again, I think it'd be up to the city on whether we allow those or not.
And how does that interface then with smoke-free, like tobacco, cigarette smoke?
Yeah, the Clean Air Act, yeah.
Clean Air Act, how does that interface?
We don't allow people to smoke in a bar right now, so.
Right, so I think that's something I would also like to have a conversation on. I don't know if we can take notes on all these things.
I'm writing them down as we
Okay,
go, Council.
because it's in direct conflict with the Clean Air Act then, in my opinion, unless it's an outdoor, but then it would have implications for neighbors or community,
Yep.
And then the other thing I actually was going to ask is, do we currently have something on the books with smoke-free around places of businesses, how many feet you have to be? Like, I don't know, when you're smoking a cigarette or a smoke product, how many feet away from a building, a public building, do you need to be?
See, I don't think it actually establishes an actual foot perimeter in the Clean Indoor Air Act as far as smoking next to an entrance. I thought only medical facilities like hospitals possibly fell under
So
that.
that would be my next question is, could we establish a foot distance from business establishments or like the library or, I feel like that would be, Mayor, do you want to?
No,
Jump
there is, some people establish privately that a 25-foot, from their business, they do that privately, 25, 50, whatever it is. But just go back to your question, Pam pointed this out to us. Under A5, it says, a person may not use cannabis flower, cannabis products, or hemp-derived consumer products in a manner that involves the inhalation of smoke, aerosol, or vapor at any location where smoking is prohibited under the Clean Indoor Air Act.
So could the city enact a prohibition on cannabis smoking in public? Like a blanket? So each business or establishment wouldn't have to post a sign on their what have you, that it's part of the, could the city take measures like that?
Well, I think that would be a little broad. If you look at A5, they're talking about essentially setting out in locations. So I guess it'd be certain locations, you'd have to define what that is.
Have to
I don't think
define.
you can just say blanket, you can never smoke cannabis in the public space, right?
Could you designate, like in a retail zoning, could you actually use the zoning?
You'd have to look, and as the officer noted, we're going to see lots of challenges to these things. But yes, I mean, you could certainly look at something like that, and it'd have to be a reasonable regulation. Otherwise, it could be challenged.
Okay,
And under the Minnesota Clean Air Act, strictly prohibits smoking except in designated areas. That's what the Clean Air Act says. I know that because I did force that at the airport. And the Clean Air Act was 1970, unless it's designated areas. That's what so if there's a designated area, the city can, or private business can designate areas of smoking where the public does not have access to.
okay, and then
That's all authorized under the Clean Air Act.
I'm just gonna go one more question, and then I'm sure I'll have plenty more later on, but these are just some initial things that I was thinking of. So when we talk about people being able to grow it in their own yards, can we, I believe Counselor Motley can shine a little light onto that. Can we regulate the size? We can't regulate, I think, the number of plants.
Plants they own.
But can you regulate the size that they're allowed to grow? Like, we don't allow our, what is it, if they're more than 3 feet high, it's a blight? If they don't mow their lawn?
6 inches is actually
Well,
yeah.
I don't know if that would be the case, but I mean, if
Yeah.
it's reasonable,
Yeah,
could we
size might be a
establish,
good
like,
idea.
it's not gonna be as high as a sunflower. I don't know if you follow what I'm saying, but I'm just, like, could we regulate that portion of it?
Well, in indoor grow only.
Okay,
Indoor
so,
grow only or enclosed indoor grow only.
and then I would also include that with the whole rental code. Like what if the landlord has the right or the tenant, what that might be for an establishment on growth on the property. And I think those are just the overall first initial gut reaction questions that I had. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. My question is, so talking about cannabis and marijuana, but what about the edibles? I know the edibles is in the legislation, so you can go right now to a liquor store because they changed the law. You go to a liquor store and buy edibles, so you can buy 10 pounds of edibles and chow down as long as you want. You're not smoking it, you're not inhaling, so you
Right.
can eat as much edibles as you want. And so can bakeries sell edible cannabis, or does that has to come in a dispensary, or just edibles only? So those are a couple of questions I have as well. Councilor Motley.
In reply to you, Counselor Paulson, when I was at the League of Minnesota Cities Conference for Marijuana, they said you can establish an ordinance for the greenhouse when they're growing it outside. You can establish the size of that. So that might be a way to hinder how big these plants, because I guess they can get pretty tall. So we could hypothetically put an ordinance in place on how large the greenhouse, because it has to be enclosed. If you're growing it outside, it has to be an enclosed structure, because they said the big problem will be the smell. People are going to be upset with the smell, which I guess I don't like the smell. I mean, probably some do, but I don't want to smell this when I'm sitting in our parks, listening to music in the park. I don't want to smell this on our public property. If they want to do it on your own property. So they actually specifically stated, it's on page 69 on the computer, very top, very first thing, beginning August 1st, 2023, which I am completely in agreement with this, a city may adopt an ordinance establishing a petty misdemeanor offense for a person who unlawfully uses the cannabis flower and all that in a public place / I would like to include the parks. And I know that's going to make your job even more busy than it already is.
That's okay. A lot of that would be education though for people too. And that's what our officers typically do. It's a reason for our officers to go up and approach that person that we're getting called about. It doesn't require a citation, but it is that, just so you're aware, you're not allowed to smoke that in the park. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Yep, it's an ordinance here in town. You know what, please carry on. It's fine.
Well, and I think if you take a look at what the other states have passed, these laws are similar. You can't smoke it in general public, but they're everywhere. It's unenforceable.
It's no different than an open liquor container,
They-
really, though.
They
you
have
know?
ordinances in place, which is a violation. It's a petty misdemeanor punishable by a $100 fine plus court costs or $50 plus court costs. And they're overwhelmed by thoughts of that, so. But yeah, setting that limitation, it would be like setting the fire pit limitation. You can't smoke it within 25 feet of any structure. You know?
I've never like,
Anyway, go ahead, Councilor Motley.
for an ordinance, like something like this, just to have something on the books, how do you even go about doing that if the council was in favor of that? Like,
I agree.
does that have to be a motion today? Or how does,
We'll make a note of that, I think, and then come back, and I think we should have a special meeting just to talk about, you know, how we're going to develop an ordinance, what kind of things. Maybe if we may direct our questions, Britt, to Colleen or to you. Sure. And we can compile that data and get the answers and have a special meeting with respect to that.
okay, and then another question, I don't know what page it is in the packet, but on mine, cities may enact policies prohibiting employees from bringing cannabis products, including edibles, to work. Are we going to,
We already have that drug-free workplace policy.
that will include that even though it's going to be
It
legal?
does
this
include
first-
that. It's because we are still federally regulated. If you receive any federal funding, you have to have a drug-free workplace policy. And it's just been given to all our staff again about a month ago to remind everybody that
Thank you, Britt.
still
Thank you.
can't have it at work, on them, in them, any other form.
Thank you, Councilor Motley. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. While we're taking all the notes for possibly our next meeting to be addressing an ordinance, I would like to include the police force, you or Maddie, to attend the meeting to give us your input on it as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and all the questions that we have, try to get those answers from the legal perspective, from the law enforcement perspective, what effect this might going to have, and clarify all those things that respects to cannabis, dispensary, personal use, property management, and the edible things. So all those questions that we've asked so far, hopefully will be researched, and we should have a meeting shortly once we get those answers and have a consolidated effort to come up with some kind of ordinance that includes all those things. And there's some departments that already have ordinances in place in other states as well that are that I think you're researching as well, Chief. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a statement I think I'd like to add is, you know, we worked really hard with our DARE our DARE program and to challenge kids to stay off of drugs. And some people think this isn't a drug. I happen to think it's a drug. So to be honest, what we're asked to be dealing with is very disappointing, in my opinion, as a parent and as someone who just believes that kids should stay substance-free. So I don't know if we could focus any type of energy or effort on protecting children from seeing people smoking. You know, I mean, cigarette smoking is a taboo. Most of these kids don't probably smoke. They probably grow up now and they vape because that's the cool thing to do. A whole generation has learned that cigarette smoking is not a cool thing. And I know this is maybe not a good time to talk about it, but I just want to put it out there that, you know, we're adults in the room here, and we're supposed to be setting standards. And I feel like what the state has done has really challenged me personally about even having conversations about the legal usage of what I believe is a drug. But in my heart of hearts, if this has to come forward and we have to deal with it, I want to have some discussion or protection mechanism, if we so can legally do, to protect the children from seeing the usage of this type of product. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, and just real quick, we just talked about the DARE program, used to be drug abuse resistant education. Now it's defined assess, respond, and evaluate. And you teach kids the tools, even though they're exposed to it, at the parents sitting at the table smoking a cigarette or drinking large quantities of alcohol. The same thing is going to hold true for this marijuana. And it, particularly if, you know, they're not growing alcohol in their yard, but they're going to be growing cannabis in their yard, and it's going to be easy access to not just the kids, anybody else who want to try it out. So I agree. Anybody else have any questions or comments they want to move? Colleen's taken some copious notes with respect to that, so. Chief, anything else? Thank you very much. Okay, let's put those things together, get those questions answered, and I think, Britt, if you would maybe check with staff and see what's available to set up a meeting to talk about this further, to establish this ordinance. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Britt? I have a couple items. First, for those of you who already know, Councilor Charlie Bearable passed away. So just to let you know, everybody know that there'll be some posting in the of services moving forward. So Charlie was a long-time city councilor and community advocate. So just for everybody and staff and our elected officials know that. The other one I have, and I'm sure, Britt, you've already addressed this and are talking about that, but I'd like to see maybe at the next committee, the whole meeting, from Brian and others about Iron Terre-Moise Event Center. I know we have a lot of things going on there, a lot of great programs that are happening there, but just getting a little update on the marketing aspect of it, where we at with our marketing director, and have we had any success in establishing any big venues moving forward and weddings or anything like that, and if not, is the impediment the cost associated with that? So all those kind of things, I'd like to have a little discussion about that at the next committee of the whole meeting if we could. Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else have anything they'd like to bring up under other items of concern? Seeing none, we'll adjourn the committee of the whole meeting. It's 10:31 a.m. Thank you.